One, one, one.
Elizabeth, we are on.
I am improvising. That's what we learned yesterday.
Let's improvise. Let's continue. Dragi gostje, dobrodošli v Mariboru.
Welcome to our conference, Building Europe Towards a Culture of High-Quality Architecture and Built Environment for Everyone.
Liebe Gäste, willkommen in Marburg. This is a special conference. It takes place in the two cities. And we have to stand here, right?
Yes,
for the
there's
cameras.
the camera.
The two European countries, Austria and Slovenia, and the two cities, Maribor and Graz. We have started yesterday in Graz, and now we are here in Maribor, in the oldest part of the city, in a Mennonite monastery that for some time served as a military barrack. And this was the most abandoned part of the city until recently, and now it's a puppet theater, but a larger cultural venue altogether. And we are sitting in a former courtyard, which now serves as a theater.
As Mateusz just said, it's a conference in two cities, and we just came from Graz with 3 buses, and it's raining, and then things go a little bit different than one planned. So all the others that just joined this conference here, please excuse that we are a little late, but it will be worth your while, I promise. So there won't be any puppet theaters going on here, but we will talk about building culture, Baukultur. But before we start, I think it's always very, very important to thank the people that are organizing this, and it's a conference in 2 cities, so there were 2 teams working together, many Zoom meetings, and I ask you all to please give our first super loud applause to this organizational team that made it possible that we're here.
Some of you might know us already, but for the rest, let me introduce you to my colleague moderator, Elisabeth Leitner. She's working in town and village development and citizen participation processes. She's the head of the Landluft. It's an organization that works in the villages. It's promoting Baukultur in the rural areas, and is one of the OMC case studies that is presented along with the OMC report.
Next to me, my colleague moderator, I'm sure all of you know, he is from Maribor, it's Mateusz Selig. He is supporting emerging young talents in architecture, and he has been doing this for the last 6 years. It was his idea, and it's one of the 15 platforms of the Creative Europe program. Thanks for doing this with me.
Thank you. And now it's not only the 2 countries here. We are happy that almost 100 participants traveled together with us on the 2 buses from Graz to Maribor today. And almost another 100 participants will join us today and tomorrow here in Maribor. So there are people from almost 20 countries here. And I think that's worth of the second applause again.
To all of you.
To all of you. And now, because almost half of the people in the room are new, we will repeat an exercise we did a couple of times today. When we say now, please stand up, turn around, and talk to the person behind you, ask him why he is coming to this conference, and who he is, and when did he become in love with architecture and cities. So now.
Well, thank you. Hello?
Thank you.
Are we
Let's continue.
Is my microphone on? Can you hear me? Yes. Well, thank you for joining us in this exercise. We already said yesterday there is always two reasons to come to a conference. Of course, there's the topic, that's why you go there, and the second one is networking. So we encourage you to get to know new people along to this afternoon and tomorrow. Yesterday in Graz, we discussed about the importance of architecture and Baukultur for the future of Europe, and we will continue this discussion here in Maribor.
But if the focus of the presentation yesterday in Graz was on the results of the OMC working group on high-quality architecture and built environment for everyone, here in Maribor we are going to focus on challenges associated with the countryside and discuss with what the wave of renovations on the countryside should include. And that's why this part of the conference is subtitled Rehabilitation from Suburbs to the Countryside. Aleš Vrhovec will later explain us more about the topic and about what will be going on here in Maribor.
We will give you a summary of yesterday's discussion right away about the topic that we discussed about. You can also talk to your neighbors in a coffee break or afterwards, of course, and they will give you the information. But before we will give you the summary, of course, we will have welcoming words here as well at the conference, and I am very happy to ask Gregor Reichenberg, Deputy Mayor of the city of Maribor, on stage for his welcoming words.
So, thank you very much. I'm really, really happy and honored and everything, what I should be as well, of course, to be part of this conference, which is not in a hierarchical way, really important for me personally. One thing is that Graz and Maribor are two cities which are basically my cities. I used to live in Graz for 7 years, where I studied, of course, architecture. What else? And the second important thing is, of course, Maribor, which is a city where I'm, as you or most of you know, also an active architect with my own office, and also a vice mayor responsible for the development, spatial development and strategical plans for the city. Of course, we're dealing or struggling with this topic, rehabilitation or rehabilitation. We have a big challenge in Maribor because the medieval city center is to be rehabilitated or rehabilitated. So the path to this point, to this goal, is of course the construction site. So Maribor, as you have already feel, I guess, with your shoes, a big construction site. So hopefully this conference will come again in a few years, where there will be no such huge construction site in the city center. We're trying to make Maribor not the most beautiful city in the world, because these are these phrases which are popular in some other cities in Slovenia. But what we would like to do is to make it the best city in the world for its inhabitants, for the people who live in Maribor. We have a big advantage. The city is so small and so crowded with spaces which are not urban, which are rural actually. We would like to make this a 15-minute city. We say 15-minute city, which means that you can be driving a bicycle, running down the hill from Pohorja, and in 15 minutes you can be in the city theater, watching some very nice opera or drama. Which means that for its inhabitants, for people of Maribor, means that we have a lot of time, spare time, to hang with each other, to talk with each other, to make these relations between us, which are the most important things in our lives. So I'm really, really happy to have you guys here in Maribor. I hope you'll enjoy the conference, for which I hope it will be a huge and major success. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm sure that also we will hear a lot of interesting things that would be a good input for the future strategies of Maribor now in the next today and tomorrow. And before we really start, I would like us to make a summary of day one of an overview of the outcomes of the architectural policies discussions that we had in Graz. And that's why I would like to invite Gerhard Jagesberger from Austrian Federal Ministry for Arts, Culture, the Civil Service and Sports, and Michaela Roth from Austrian Ministry of Agriculture, Regions and Tourism to give us this short brief.
Many thanks, Mateusz, Deputy Mayor of Maribor, Mr. Reichenberg. Many thanks for the invitation. We are really very happy and glad to see you all here. It's really a pleasure after this time we all experienced. And I think it's a very special moment also having a conference in this setting, I would say. So first, a big thank for the invitation and for the whole process we did together to the Slovenian colleagues. Please also a big applause for the Slovenian colleagues, Spela, Spanjel, Spela, Kuhar, Mateusz, please help me. Aleš, and I'm sure I forgot somebody. So please, for the whole team, a big applause. So I also want to mention, of course, Vlado Gracia and Tomasz Krzysztof. Building Europe is a very big project, but building a conference in this setting is also quite a project, I have to say. But it was a very enjoyable, very intense, and very interesting process. So we are standing now on this bridge. So we already crossed the bridge from Austria to Slovenia to Maribor. And yeah, I think it was a very intense day yesterday. And what do you think about the day we had ahead, Michael?
Well, actually, first of all, also from my side, a warm welcome and thank you for being here with us. This is a puppet theater. We are the two Muppets from the balcony, so Gerhard and me, and we are trying now to summarize in a very brief way like what we heard yesterday. And yesterday's main theme was, of course, about the OMC group, the Open Method of Coordination, High Quality Architecture and the Built Environment for everyone. And to set it into a broader, also political context, like, you know, things are going on, the new European Bauhaus and other things. And we had several panels where we started with, under the auspices also of several, let's say, important persons that made also this conference possible on both sides of both sides in the region. And so we heard about, let's say, things like the aesthetics of European identity, dare I say. We heard a lot about, of course, the new European Bauhaus, how could it be different? We heard also about examples, good practice examples, like how to appreciate the value of, let's say, buildings that need renovation, rehabilitation, whatsoever, and to take up its existing potentials and to bring it to new splendor. So, and thereby serving the purposes of, let's say, sustainability and beauty. So we also heard then about the results of the Open Method of Coordination groups. If you are interested in that, the report is online since yesterday in English language. I hope we might be able to provide you with a link very soon. So you can have a look at the results of the OMC group. And we heard also about, or discussed a little bit, the question, well, now we have a lot of work on the table. It should not end up in the drawer. So how will things continue? And what are we going to do, or what needs to be done in order to keep this momentum? Gerd.
Yes, ÜKBK also gave an outlook. What should be done now? So as Michael said, the report is online, and it went online exactly on the 6th of October, so exactly on the first day of this conference. One aspect, of course, is the dissemination, so that means to communicate the results as broadly as possible. The second thing is, he mentioned, is capacity building. And what else could be more capacity building than the field trips we did just now? It's all about quality of the experience of the built environment of architecture. The third thing is, he mentioned, is mainstreaming. And this is also crucial to spread it out and more broadly out of the sector. So to try, I know we should be very, very short. So maybe one idea could be, I have kind of a picture, there are 3 lines. One is a vertical line, which means that we have kind of an urge, kind of an emergency situation, just to mention, of course, accelerated climate change, but also other crises. So that means there is really the momentum and the urge to act. So that could be a vertical line to consider to go really deeply and act. And the second line is, and we heard that yesterday from different perspectives, it's very important, I would call it coordination. So that means there are so many initiatives, so many very good projects. There is a list, you saw this list, and now I think it's very important to connect this horizontal line and to build up a sustainable network and to coordinate. And the third one maybe is a diagonal line, and this is, is going up, so it's a process. This is very important. So we see the conference also as a milestone in a process which started before and will continue very strongly. And the conference should provide new ideas and coordination aspects and ideas for acting to this process.
Yes, and I think we have to keep it a little bit here. Time is running out a little bit, and we already realized that we are a little bit late. However, we have a little final exercise here, the 2 Muppets in the Puppet Theater, and we have prepared the fast-forward record for you. We have prepared a kind of word wrap, where we have some, let's say, statements or messages from yesterday, just totally, let's say, mixed, and just to give you some food for thoughts that might inspire our discussions and your thinking maybe today and tomorrow. So are you ready? Should we start?
I can try one, just an image. Yeah?
Okay, please.
Yeah, the best way, or the Italian way to slow down traffic, is to provide as many as possible ice cream stands.
Politics should be boring and culture should be inspiring.
Streets should be built for long tables where we can eat together and not for parking slots.
What we are doing here is about the soul of Europe.
I think that's enough.
That's enough?
Yeah.
One more. Come on, one more.
You.
Okay, so me. Every medium-sized enterprise has a research department. Why doesn't every city have one?
Yes, very good.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Gerhard and Michael, to spark things up. And now let me invite here on the stage Aleš Vrhovec, who was directing and leading the organizational board here in Slovenia, to give us some kind of roadmap for today and tomorrow.
Thank you, Mateusz. Thank you, Elizabeth. I would like to welcome, on behalf of the organizer, Chamber for Architecture and Spatial Planning of Slovenia, I would like to welcome all the colleagues, of course, Vice Mayor, who already went somewhere, dear guests, dear participants, faculties for architecture, which you will see later on did have quite a significant role. Also the sponsors who backed us in a, let's say, a special situation of an absent state. And also, I would like to express my gratitude to the speakers today, Georg Pendl, Janez Hužel, who is going to come later, and Dietmar Feistel, to respond to our request and to appear in this audience. First, I would like to say a big thank you to our Austrian colleagues who did a fantastic job. We will try to step in your shoes with some difficulties, as you can see. A lot has already been said on the first day of our conference, which was really quite an experience, also for an experienced conference goer as I am. Landluft presented somehow similar topic as we would like to introduce in our country. Giulia Vallone introduced fantastic, let's say, interventions, and also the program which is called Old House, New Home, which I found fantastic. And also I would like to point out the Veronika Valk-Siska on the one sentence in the OMC report. Architect is a well-placed broker between different disciplines, which I find it extremely important. And we will maybe come to that later on in our Congress, in our conference. What I see is a really nice continuation of the work which is somehow going on in Europe. This was somehow, of course, we've seen it has started quite early on, but let's say just mention latest process, which is Davos Declaration. We have heard quite a lot of it. Then the work of OMC Group, which was finalized with a report presented yesterday. Then we have a new European Bauhaus, which also, as it was pointed out many times, it's somehow getting a momentum. And then what we were not, in fact, saying yesterday, but it's very important, and it's going to be done under the Slovene presidency, there are council conclusions, which are going to somehow, let's say, summarize or abstract, let's say, outcomes of the report of the OMC Group, of New European Bauhaus, and of course, maybe also with the message of this conference. We can maybe have a little window of opportunity to add also that. And I urge all the experts here, because this is somehow the let's say, the expert Europe regarding policies, to put some pressure on Slovene presidency, because it's really, all those things have to be somehow summarized in the council conclusions. Austrian part was about policy. It was about a policy also on high level, and it was about, the field trip was about the good practice. And to put it somehow Monty Python-esque, and now something completely different. Just give me a second. Okay. So, Slovenia does have architectural policy from 2017. We do have quite some examples of good practice, and I can confidently say we have a good architecture. But the thing is that what we actually live in is this. This is what I call a gallery of portraits. And this is the, let's say, typical house that the typical Slovene, you will see that more than half of the population populates this type of the house. It's an urban sprawl. You will get to know maybe a bit more how the process of let's say, constructing those type of houses was going on. It's a non-urban condition. It is what I like to call that it's a third entity. It's not urban, but it's not rural either. And this is maybe something that you could get a taste of it in Hiša Denk, which we visited before, because this is the typical situation. Of course, not with the quality of architecture and also food. So we would like to talk about the house, which is the, let's say, the ignored topic by us architects. It's the underdog and it's the under the radar of the interest of architectural profession. It is an extremely local topic, and it's, as I already mentioned, it's a mass phenomena. So there are 360,000 single-family individual houses in Slovenia, populated by more than half of population, which is 1.1 million of people. And also the interesting thing is that this is somehow the remnant of the, let's say, in a good sense, I mean, of a socialist era and of a do-it-yourself ethos. So most of those houses were somehow built by the hands of their owners. The title of the conference, you know all the, let's say, usual professional wording. You have renovation, restoration, reconstruction, retrofit, reuse, adaptive reuse. What we would like to introduce is the rehabilitation, put in, I don't know the word, but you know what it is, because it's in fact put together by two words. It's a rehabilitation, which is a medical term, recovery after injury or illness, and rehabilitation, which is a repopulation, which is also something that is needed in those non-urban areas. I would borrow a word or a sentence from Jeff Koons, an artist, not really my favorite, but let's say the expression is quite interesting. He said, art is not in an object, art is in a viewer. And what we would like to see is the potential, so the potential of each of those houses. And the potential is not in that particular object, not in that particular condition of this typical house. The potential is in the viewer. We would somehow like to discover this potential of each and every house. What we are dealing here is really the ultimate for everybody. So this is the topic which is, as I said, it's not on the radar of architects. It's completely non-elitistic, and it's something where the architecture, in fact, does not exist. And of course, we would also like to speak about climate excellence and something that should be achieved in rehabilitating all those houses. So we would really like to change this particular singular house, which stands as a problem, to an opportunity, and to make, let's say, sort of the package of all, or at least 1%. We are quite, of course, reasonable about that. We would be quite happy if, for instance, 10% of those houses would be rehabilitated, which would still mean a big mass of work being done. So just briefly, some statistic. As I said, 300,000 houses. which are estimated to be sort of somehow about 45 billion euros in worth. And it is usually the only, let's say, the only thing that a person owns. Of course, there is, I mean, it's much of the worth people possess in Slovenia. And the average date of construction statistically is 1973, and as I already said, half of the population is inhabiting them. And the questions we pose within this problem of a single-family house is, of course, decarbonization, affordable housing. We see this as a sort of reserve for the square meters we lack in cities, and for the square meters we would like somehow to be available for young people and everyone who is in a need, because we do have quite a big housing problem. And of course, another thing is that we would like to make this an economic opportunity, because we are putting economy in the center of this rehabilitation movement. Basic principles we would like to introduce. We would be very happy if there would be less new construction and reuse of an existing structures. We would like to somehow expand the notion of heritage. So is something what is not a monument also heritage? And then what we would like to also somehow introduce is that each of those houses has a potential to be split into units. Because maybe I did not mention, typical house in Slovenia has approximately 250 square meters and is inhabited by 2 to 3 persons. So this is a lot of square meters, creating a lot of problems also as a result of that. What we would like to do is to address municipalities, because we see them as a partner in this, let's call it, movement, and we would like to address this as also to business sector, because we see this as a major economic opportunity, on one hand for businesses, and also on the other hand for owners of this type of houses. And I must say it's a very non-architectural project. We are just instigators of this, of this process, but we would really be happy if it was not considered architectural, which is sometimes considered being elitistic and so on. And I would like to conclude with the words of Ruth Reichstein from New European Bauhaus, which was said yesterday. I was quite happy to hear also from that side. She said that we don't know really where we are going right now. So the framework is this conference. We are just starting the project. So there is nothing we can show that has already been done. But we are at we are starting. We have some kind of promises that we are doing. We will be working continually for at least 1 year. And what we would like to start is a movement of rehabilitation. So this is really the right word. It should become a movement. So thank you very much, and hopefully enjoy the rest of the speakers and the whole process. Thank you.
Thank you, Aleš. I can tell you that in Austria there's the same topic going on, and to add another statistic, the Architekturzentrum Wien, the Architecture Museum in Vienna, they had this big exhibition and they did research, and they found out that if you would take all inhabitants in Austria, which is 9 million, and put them in all existing 1- and 2-family houses, there would only be 4 people in each house. That's how many houses there are standing in Austria. So I think it's a topic for all over Europe. But now I'm happy to welcome Georg Pendel. He's president of the Architects' Council of Europe, and we're listening to your welcoming words on the topic of this conference.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. I'm especially happy to speak here in the second part of the conference in Maribor. But I go a bit a step back to before what Alice was talking about. I go back to the OMC group, the Open Method of Coordination group, which was mentioned before by the two colleagues, and who has ended its work yesterday by presenting the final report. And I think these days we face a very good step forward for the architectural culture and the Baukultur community. A very long and a very fruitful process they have been doing has come to an excellent end with a very good result. And the event stands in a row with the Leipzig Charter 1 and 2, with the Davos Declaration, and the upcoming New European Bauhaus, which I come back later to the topic. All these have the focus on our built environment, and this is very obvious that we spend 90% of time we spent in built spaces, in inner spaces, and since many years, more than half of the population in the world is living in cities. So what we are building is our environment, is our built environment. So it's of a very crucial importance, and not only for us here in the space, because we might be even able in a certain way to make it better for ourselves by different reasons, but it's crucial for all the people out there, and for them affordability is of crucial importance especially. Therefore I put the term affordability in my first chapter of what I want to say. It's the first point. And it means excellence within built environment doesn't need to be expensive. This is very important to say. It needs to be future-oriented, zukunftsfähig, in German, nature-based, integrative, democratic, and this is very important, has to take everybody with. Affordability means that nobody is left behind. The processes which we are starting are only successful when everybody can come with on board. Excellence in built environment means excellence in everyday life. And this means where people live, where they sleep, where they love, where they spend their work time, and where they spend their nights and whatsoever. So this is what I mean. Everyday life is in a certain way something else than the Sunday life. So I call certain architecture is Sunday architecture. These are the opera houses, the theaters, which are mainly already in the focus of having to be of a good quality. This is somehow accepted in Europe, but very often it's then forgotten that the more important, in my view, thing is where people are really spending their life, meaning in the spaces, in the apartments, in the housing area, where they are working and where they are spending their days in the public spaces. This is what I call Alltagsarchitektur, and I think the focus, and this is, I'm very happy to see in a certain, also in the OMC work, as well as in the concepts of the European Bauhaus, this aspect of the everyday architecture is coming more and more important. And it's also, we have to see that it's not the new generation, I would say already the present generation of architects are not anymore after this old-fashioned, I would even say, way of being, which ends up in the summit as a starism. This is a bit over. The generation of architects who are working now are dedicated to basic solutions for everyone, and still with excellence in design, use of material, economic and nature-based, and beauty. Another thing I want to mention is, I think in the discussion of the recent years, it was earlier a bit the contradiction always between heritage and architecture, or between heritage people and architects. And by good reason, partly, because I must say sometimes architects did not have very much respect of what they have found on the places and in the cities. And I think this contradiction is a bit vanishing. It's not a bit vanishing, it is vanishing, because everybody knows that what we build now is the heritage of the future, in case it has quality, and it has to have quality. This is the major point. And therefore, actually, there is no contradiction between heritage. Heritage means only that we have to listen and to look what we find, and then we have to build, and we have to continue to build. Weiterbauen is the German term for that. We don't need to make something new, which is totally new. We have to accept what we find, and we have to continue the fabric of the city and of the environment which we find there. Contextuality is another term which is a bit more the bubble speech. The same is for participation of public and participation of users. It's also not anymore new since 25 years, but it's more and more underlined, and I think this is very needed because it has to do with empowerment. It empowers the people if they participate, and it also makes it much more possible to that the people who are using the built environment identify themselves with the built environment, and this creates an identity in a city, even in a region. It's often said architects are difficult, which is also true, but in reality architecture is difficult. And so it appears also very difficult to laymen, and who often are surprised about the speech of architects, who seem to talk about different things than people expect. And this means also we have to learn a common language, which is to be understood, otherwise there is no empowering possible, there is no cooperation possible, so this is a very important part also of the story. And in this respect, I think the work of the OMC group is so crucial, because this work prepares the field by its spirit and also by the influence on rules, on the legal framework. I mean, of course, nothing, this is like always, nothing goes so easy. There was yesterday an intervention, why don't we get a new procurement directive? Of course, we cannot ask just generally politics, we want to have it better, and they ask, what do you want to have better? We want jobs. Easy, but how do you create a better environment for the profession? It's also part of the thing that you create a better environment of the cultural dimension of the built environment. Then it's in continuity, it ends up to these very concrete changes which are possible through these processes. And for this, I want to especially thank all the creators and contributors of the OMC paper, and also to those people who made it possible that the group was created. Actually, the group is part of the work program of the Council, work program for culture from 2019 to 2022, and already a bit earlier finished. And there was the first time, actually, on the European level, architecture was a topic among, 20 others. It was topic number 17, and we were very happy about it, and I think the result is really excellent. And I find it absolutely fortunate that we have a generation of people working in the national ministries who dedicate their effort to the quality of the built environment. This is something new, and this is something I think I want to thank all of those who are present working on this field. You did a great job. Another topic I want to mention, I'm often asked, what do all these papers serve for? These documents, these declarations, how do they make a change? And I think this is a very often upcoming question, and I think the answer is manifold. Things make a change also simply only by being said, by being stated, by being expressed, and by written down. These things already can change the way of thinking in all levels, by all those who read and listen, of course, only, but there are many. It can open doors, and it can create opportunities. Things make changes as they need working together with others, communicating. And here in Europe, we have actually the wonderful opportunity to find so many wonderful examples and ways of working, because we are so different, and we can collect so different ways, thoughts and examples. This is a richness which is really, we can be happy to have it. And the things papers can also make a change. It results in change of rules, laws, legislations, as I mentioned before, about building laws, space planning, public procurement, and everything else. Policy papers mean commitment. mean commitment. We have reached a common ground. We stand on the common ground, and we disseminate the message, and we communicate the message. Policy papers and such documents are also, and this I find a very important aspect, these are kind of toolboxes You have like a toolbox, you have arguments and examples which have been collected, which have been discussed, which have been distilled, and which can then be used by everybody on every level. Any mayor in any small village or city finds an example, finds an argument, finds a concept in this toolbox, and thinks, that's a good idea, let's make it in my place. And this is what I call tool. It's like you have tools and you search then one or the other tool and you can just use it, and it's a collection of experience. The spirit is nothing changes the world, but everything makes a difference. Step by step, but very important to do it. Another thing, and in a way the same applies to the initiative of Mrs. von der Leyen. It was mentioned already before, the new European Bauhaus, which she has proposed a bit more than a year ago, and in her speech about the State of the Union to the Parliament. And to say a few words about this, I think this the name, the New Europe Bauhaus, is in a certain way a narrative, and is an initiative of the cabinet of Mrs. von der Leyen, and includes the possibility for a fundamental change in the thinking of the European community, thinking about Baukultur, about building, and about energy, about sustainability, because this far the European level has discussed sustainability and energy consumption, etc., purely in a quantitative way, counting and measuring, counting kilowatt hours, counting the amount of breathing of the building and things like this, and but has not had a holistic view. We all know that there is a good negative example, having a perfect passive standard whatsoever energy house in the countryside, and then there are two Porsche Cayenne in front of the door. It makes no sense. So you have to start from the beginning. It's space planning, it's infrastructure, it's planning the trams and the rails, and then you get to the closer, you get to the urban plan, you get to the space plan, and then at the pretty much end you get to the building. So having a holistic view of all components, also having in view the way of planning, the integration of the people, the involvement. This is all part of this holistic approach, which is possible in the thinking of the new European Bauhaus, which is a call to all European people, especially to planners, to us also, to think about new ways of planning. And this is more or less the same what I said before, like this holistic approach. So there is a chance for it, and now I have to sort out a bit better what I have here. And the quote of her, I want to quote her, she said in her speech, I want the next generation EU to kickstart a new European renovation wave. And this is not just an environmental or economic project, it needs to be a cultural project. And this also means that culture is not the number 50 after 49 others. It means that in the core of the thinking, of the planning of all this, it is culture. It's a cultural project. And this is a fundamental chance. And there was now half a year of openness, of collecting examples. There were prizes. There was the European Bauhaus Prize. There were 20 categories, and actually I'm happy that 2 categories went to people whom I know also personally, Anna Heringer for a project in the theme architecture and landscape, and to Martin Rauch with his clay earth building in the theme of architecture and material. I want to draw your attention to a thing which was also already mentioned yesterday. From the Architects' Council of Europe, we initiated a group. We made an open call to all sister organizations at the European level, and it was created. We call us now ourselves the New European Bauhaus Collective. We have 14 organizations signed up at the moment. It's the it's the space planners, it's the landscape planners, it's interior architects, it's engineers, it's the architecture school, and it's the art schools, and some others. And we have made a mutual declaration, and we had a mutual conference in the end of April, and with quite a good result and a good attendance. And the goal of this was to influence this process of the creation of the new Bauhaus, which is now simply happening. Personally, I want to end with the 3 points which I'm after, because I'm a kind of a pragmatic person, but I want also a certain concreteness. And for me, 3 points are kind of giving an example what could be part of the whole strategy. Demolition has to be an exception. It also refers what Alex before said. No demolition. Everything has a value. Everything is valuable. It contains energy, material, etc. And there are so wonderful examples how you, for example, if you take the last prize of the Mies van der Rohe Prize, the biggest European prize of architecture, it went to a building of the colleagues Lacaton et Vassal in Bordeaux. It was a block from the 60s, late 60s, 70s, a thing which normally most of the people would say we call the caterpillar, and they refurbished it, they added something. People who was living there could stay inside to a pretty good price, which was after not much more than before, but what I want to say. And it was a certain way of reuse, refurbishment of an existing thing, and this is the perfect example, which also proves that demolition really should be an exception. The second thing, what I would state, is no new building land. In Switzerland, they do it already. There is no new building land. We have covered the world with our human traces. Even the jungle in Brazil is to be demolished. We leave no space to other species, and we get it back, of course, as we now know with our thing there. And therefore, I think it's a good principle to say it's enough. And we have already enough cities and areas which are built, no new building land. And the third thing is I have it from Dietmar Steiner, the long-lasting and the founder of the Architekturzentrum Wien, no space lower than 3 meters. This would be very simple and very effective. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pendel, about your words about everyday architecture, about the common language. I would even say we have to learn the languages of others today. It's not the time for architecture to be heroic. It's not the time to dominate. It's time for humility if we want to accomplish projects like rehabilitation. And now I think we are ready to start the first panel.
Actually, we are, but I think we should use like this shift from the welcoming words to the panel. For all of those that are sitting on the staircases, maybe we could, like, if you want to look for a seat, we do it now so we don't disturb the panel number 1. Movement, whoever wants to move. There are like a few seats right there. You would have to like maybe go this way around, because we want you all to be comfortable so you're able to listen. You have to tell it to Uroš, because he is doing the panel number 1. I don't know. All of those that have a seat, you can like stand up and shake a bit, so there's some movement. See, Robert shows you how it's done. The difference from the day yesterday in Graz, where we hosted 2 panels, to the conference here in Maribor, is that we introduce the people who host the panels. And everything set? Because then I can introduce the first host from our panel about urban problems in rural areas. The first panel host is Uroš Lobnik. He is the head of Department of Architecture and chair of spatial planning at the Faculty of Civil Engineering and Architecture at the University of Maribor. He also works as an architect, urban planner, architectural theorist and lecturer, and he is also co-founder of AU Architecti, an award-winning architectural office from Maribor. Welcome on stage.
Excuse me.
And maybe you can turn off our microphones.
Okay.
I hope so, because I want to breathe without you listening. Yeah.
So I'm extremely pleased that today the Maribor Puppet Theatre is full and that Maribor take a part in hosting this eminent conference. It is not the first time for me that Slovenian and Austrian architects are organizing something together, but I'm really glad that now it's time that we are talking about European Baukultur, and I really hope that the result of this conference will be continuous cooperation and exchange of opinions, because in the last 20 years we have not succeeded. The conference is also important for the Slovenia, its architects, city, and at least also for Department of Architecture at the Faculty of Civil Engineering, Traffic Engineering and Architecture, University of Maribor, which taking part in the organization of this complex event. So now I will present the panel 1, Urban Problems in Rural Areas. So the title topic of the panel is Urban Problems in Rural Areas. According to a list of lecturers and discussants, the panel could be given a subtitle, Urban Problem in the Slovenia Countryside. The issue of country life can no longer be avoided because rural development is influenced by two global phenomena. The first phenomenon is increasing migration from rural areas to cities, which results in empty buildings and demographic changes in village structures and changes in cultural landscape. The second phenomenon is the intense suburbanization, which was supported by almost all European countries after the Second World War. The term rural space refers to the highly complex region with very different manifestations and usage structures. The OECD defines a community as rural if its population density is below 150 inhabitants per square meter. According to this definition, circa 93% of the globe is made up of rural areas. The emptying of the village in recent decades has been mainly due to demographic reasons, but also to a large extent to the abandonment of the peasant way of life and the related immigration. Many experts warn that some areas will still be empty and others over-urbanized, which on the one hand challenge us to appropriate revitalization. For example, by encouraging development based on local opportunities, and on the other hand, to the requirement to prevent an increase in building surfaces. The challenge is also the urbanization of the countryside, as urbanization is not only the migration from the countryside to the cities, but also the spread of urban life to the countryside, which is reflected in the fact that in some villages there is almost no traditional farmhouse anymore. Or where apart from empty ruins there is almost no house left to reflect the building identity of the local countryside. The latter is even more characteristic of villages that are emptying than of villages that are expanding, but not organically, by the getting new houses and neighborhoods that have nothing to do with the overall visual and functional image of the village. So, where is the rural perspective? In coexistence with suburban living, or in changing the processes of suburbanization? Let's see what answers our debaters have prepared for these questions. So as I'm the first presenter, so I'm started with my, my opinion. This is a panel rehabilitation single-family house from suburbs to the countryside. The workshop was organized with the help of the Chamber of Architecture and Spatial Planning of Slovenia and took place from the beginning of spring to the end of summer this year. As Aleš Vrhovec said today, we set 3 simple principles for the workshop at the beginning. From new construction to retrofitting existing houses, so reuse, then extension of the concept of building heritage. Heritage is old that is built, and the third one is each house that is too big can be divided into two units. With the workshop, we encourage a process that will only begin with the conference and will continue until the end of next year. We will talk about how we intended to continue with the project tomorrow in panel 3, connecting policies and resources, when Polona Filipic will present the starting points for the preparation of the rehabilitation manual. As I'm the first to present the result of the workshop, I will shed light on the spatial situation, which largely reflects the culture of living in Slovenia. Detached houses in Slovenia are the most desirable and spatially most wasteful housing typology. In a large number of cases, a typical suburban Slovenian house has around 250 square meters. It was built in the 70s and in the 20th century, usually most by the owner himself. When it was built, a family of 4 live in it, but today is inhabited by 2 or even a single person and has not undergone any maintenance. Slovenian suburban house and its parcel often represent the only property of a person. Slovenes do not invest in shares, they invest their money mainly in houses. 94% of apartments in Slovenia are privately owned. The typical suburban house has 3 to 4 floors, a basement, ground floor, a first floor, and often an attic. The house is placed in the middle of plot, always at least 4 meters away from the neighbors, with the fence around the plot boundary is isolated from the surroundings. The shape of the house and its placement on the plot and completely negate the morphology and topography of the settlements. It is typical for Slovenes that they are proud of their houses, and although they are considered an introverted nation, they like to show their property, especially with their appearance. They like to show their commitment to the local community. Is therefore not surprising that on a plot which is on an average 400 to 500 square meters with extensions, superstructures, fireplace, swimming pools, etc. They are constantly showing what's going on their parcels and their status. Almost everything in it is problematic, from questionable construction, poor insulation, inadequate windows to outdated installation, use of hazardous materials, bad or naive architectural design, unused surfaces, poor connection to the garden, and has no connection with the local space in which it was built. Many houses were not built to completion and were therefore supported by even more rapid decay. The problem of the Slovene urban development is not the extensive urbanization, but the harsh suburbanization with its most popular product, the suburban house. Everywhere we look, almost always, is in front of us, and at least there is always one house that eats up a natural and built space with its 400 square meter plot. It stands, once again, everywhere. This is the main reason why in the workshop we started dealing with the typical suburban house and with its rehabilitation. Detached houses in Slovenia are the most, as I said before, desirable typology. Intensive suburbanization raises the question of how to tackle the sustainable renovation of a detached house and spaces that are developed using a building and a plot. As a rule, the plot is later built almost entirely and used for various purposes: work at home, crafts, sports, recreation, housing for a young, old family, and so on. Such sets of plots, when losing spatial features, establish areas that are no longer exclusively residential. Given the diverse use of land, the Slovenian suburb has a distinctly hybrid structure, and the detached house on its plot shows an extremely high degree of flexibility and the ability to develop completely new activities with the self-sufficiency of its users. So the key issue is not the sustainable renovation of houses, but how to renovate the house which becomes the core of the spatial, cultural, and economic transformation of Slovenia countryside. This, however, is a question of the culture of living, so Baukultur. Given the diverse use of land, the Slovenia suburb has a distinctly hybrid structure, and the detached house on its plots shows an extremely high degree of flexibility and the ability to develop completely new activities within the self-sufficiency of its users. The own initiative development of the Slovenia suburb and the purely regulated construction of single-family houses have extremely negative effect on the environment due to their spatial, material, and energy waste. The energy and renovation of detached houses and areas built with such houses rests on the responsibility for investors, planners, and the state policy of environmental subsidies. The key to the development of a responsible suburbia and responsible attitude towards the environment is the establishment of deliberate urban planning, the aim of which is to reduce the negative impacts of suburbia on the environment and the development of settlements. The development of responsible suburbia is based on the rearrangement of the built found of single-family houses and patterns of a typical environment, and largely depends on the exploring of new urban planning strategies, conditions for the design of buildings, and regulation on the construction in areas of detached houses. So, let's see how our colleagues from the Faculty of Architecture in Ljubljana saw the workshop Rehabilitation, a single-family house from the suburbs to the countryside. I invite to the stage Vlatka Ljubljanović from the Faculty of Architecture in Ljubljana and a partner in the architectural office Dans Arhitekti, which is characterized by exceptional engagement in creating social architecture. Please, Vlatka.
Hello. Are we going to have the projection? I don't see. Okay. Perfect. What was actually my aim today is to present the prevailing topics that students were dealing with during our workshop. Uroš already said quite a lot about workshop and thematics that was given to them. So since we cannot present all 14 projects one by one, I will try to do it in 10 minutes, stressing only the important topics, as I said. So if I start now. We will say that students were actually dealing a lot or mostly with the lack of public space, improving social contacts to build a community, and at the end, what was actually the main topic of this workshop, regenerating single-family house. But without dealing with the space, should I do it? Or you can do it for me. Okay. So when they were dealing with public space, which is mainly seen as a point of improving life for them, they were addressing the solutions as widening the sidewalks and narrowing the traffic section of the street. That means transforming the infrastructure for cars into a shared space for both cars and pedestrians. Transforming street into pleasant place, planting a tree and adding a bench. Or, other group, they were adding a small DIY wooden structures as meeting places in a specific point where routine of everyday life is happening. Then again, the other group was connecting open spaces in front of the houses into a unique zone. This unique zone would inhabitants use for socializing of the neighborhood without fences. Again, using trees to establish cozy corners for neighbors to chat and children to play. Another topic when they were dealing with the public space, they noticed that actually the edges of the suburban areas or the countryside or these settlements are seen as a potential of this open public space, walkways, playgrounds, basketball field, greenery. And when they were dealing with the settlement as a whole, they found out that actually the parts of these settlements are not connected. So what they were doing, they were offering they were projecting, they were building a bridge, creating a diagonal, or projecting a circular pathway around the settlement. Another interesting proposal was actually dealing with the edge zone of each plot. That means we have a house standing on a plot, and we have this in-between space, which they were actually proposing to make of it a public space. If I conclude now with this public space topic, I have to mention a group that was dealing with 9 tricks for developing existing neighborhood. That's how they called it. And it was actually, they were first analyzing atmospheres of the settlement. They were analyzing countryside, history of the settlement, or they were finding elements in the architecture they found there. And what they were offering was a revival of old, poorly used structures, for example, for a new brewery, for gallery, for cooperative for borrowing, for youth center, or they were funding program for traditional countryside wooden structures for some vernacular architecture found at the spot. Then, second prevailing topic, as I mentioned in the beginning, was actually how to improve social contacts, how to build a community. Students were found out that actually these monofunctional areas have to be changed into a multifunctional one. Why? Because elderly could easily exercise everyday chores, and because the mostly active part of the population that lives in the suburbs or in the countryside, they're working somewhere else, and if this area would become multifunctional, they would spend more time in the neighborhood and they would build a community. Many students see the opportunity to resolve the problem of elderly people living in large houses or farmhouses. They see cohabitation of elderly as a solution, but as well cohabitation with young families who can take care of renovating old or empty structures. These communities would play a role of focal points, of concentration points in suburbia or countryside. And again, build a community. Then on the other hand, where suburban settlements are attached to the historical settlements, that means with some rural population, the focus can be in interaction between suburban and rural inhabitants, those who are migrating every day and those who are living rural way of life, those few. That means exchanging knowledge, informations, exchanging the experience of different way of life. And of course, they were talking a lot about work at home. Work at home, this is not, би lahko to vsakih 15 minut? Naprej? Sorry. It was meant to be all the projects on, but there are only 4. This is only one project, the one that was proposing the DIY structures. Okay. More you can see tonight at the exhibition, but I will go on with maybe with this text. Work at home, which is actually also one of that was one of the topics that students were dealing with, especially because they all experienced it due to the COVID situation that we had. And for them, suburbia and countryside became very attractive from that point of view when the city is shut down. And of course, now we come to the third topic, which is dealing with the issue of inappropriate house. For them, for students, one-family house or detached house in suburbia was mostly criticized because it's a large structure, which is economically unsustainable. Or they were criticizing the typology or the poor architectural values. And this is what they were proposing. One project was dealing with renovating large attached house into a multi-apartment typology by adding universal wooden extension. This universal wooden extension would replace many, many extensions that usually a Slovenian house has, and it would help reorganizing house and offer space for a vertical communication, for terrace, for living room, for dining room, whatever the apartment would need. This wooden extension can be easily adapted to different contexts and needs. Then again, other projects proposed a spatial envelope of the building. This spatial envelope of the building, which can envelope one or more houses in the bigger structure, was proposed with the goal to offer diversity of typologies of residential houses in the suburb and to increase the urbanity of suburbia, especially to densify it. So when they came to the houses, when they were dealing with the material, what was actually the point of this workshop, they found out that it's really needed to be densified. Then again, another proposal was establishing concentrated development areas by connecting neighboring houses into large clusters. What does it mean? Or, namely, houses are usually positioned in the center of the large plot and therefore separated. students have developed an adaptive connecting extension that can be used to connect two neighboring houses. By applying it to a row of houses, a denser urban tissue can be established by densifying the existing scattered one. The cluster itself then offers further opportunities for establishing public spaces in front, toward the street, and self-sufficient garden in the back. And then at the end, I have to mention one more group, which offered an application, one app. This app would connect the owners of two big houses and those who are searching for a new home. The app would work as a Kickstarter. You write the amount you are prepared to invest, and app finds a potential cohabitants or suitable houses for you. So, I'm so sorry you couldn't see any of the projects, but maybe to conclude, I will just say that there were, of course, other issues and topics, but these three issues of public space, issue of building community, and issue of regenerating large one-family house were prevailing. It is interesting that students were not able to think house without context. For them, it was much more difficult to deal with the issue of house in comparison to the issue of public space or building community. Thank you. But here is the catalog.
Our second guest is another mentor from the Faculty of Architecture in Ljubljana, Professor Juri Sadar, an architect and co-owner of the architecture firm Sadar Vuga Arhitekti, whose works at last 20 years have left a big mark in Slovenia with public buildings such as Chamber of Commerce and so on and so on. And his office and work at faculty has always been involved in updating the planning of a single-family house and its role in the suburb. I ask him for a brief comment because we are very short with time on the topic of the workshop.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's good to see the full audience. Thank you, Uroš. Thank you, Vlatka. Since our time is already past, I will just give maybe a short comment that was actually my perspective on this workshop and the perspective of our students, the group of students. And it's also something that I kind of found out through dealing with this topic at that workshop. I think it's the question of the identities. Since there are so many of those buildings, they actually create the identity of our landscape. Usually we criticize the way how it looks, how those buildings look, how those settlements transform from something that is compact, that is traditional, to something that is completely uncontrollable. But on the other hand, we saw it as an, how shall I say it, it's a fact. It's a fact about the identity, and we've kind of decided that it's really important to deal with that, to research, to investigate. We're going to do that next year as well. Try to decompose those self-built structures, try to create sort of architecture vocabulary, try to find the inventiveness within those structures that we see that are sometimes uncommon, basically on the verge of being curiosities in the landscape and so on. But in order to admire the ugliness of them and see the potential in them. So I think it's really good that we sit here, it's really good that we talk about that, and it's really good that we research and work with those structure even further on. Thank you very much. Maybe some questions or... Is this not the...
Thank you, Jure. Our second guest, or no, I should start. So, I'm pleased to announce Professor Janez Koželj, the Goliath of Slovenian architecture and urbanism, deputy mayor of the city of Ljubljana and owner of the company Sri Biro Arhitekti, to present the work he probably deals with in all his functions only on Sundays, in a lecture entitled Architecture for Every Day. 30 years ago, he lectured us students on social housing construction, especially inspiring us for the work of Heinz Teseno and Bruno Taut. With its houses in the Slovenia suburbs and the countryside, one of the many family houses sets the criteria for quality construction. Please, Janez.
Dear students, dear colleagues, good afternoon. Simply saying, okay, I'm going to present it our recent and not so recent works, but to stay in time frame, I'm going to use my text to explain so complex theme you're tackling, your conference is tackling. So the architecture for every day is namely the title of my presentation, but it was suggested by organizers. So that I'm not sure, I'm not really sure exactly what did they want to address with this. Okay, but nevertheless. So I can only guess about it. No? The everyday architecture is namely considered as banal, no? As ordinary, as common, as usual. Therefore, nothing special. Something trivial that is lacking in qualities. But in opposite to this qualification in our office, we are trying to escape the routine by doing architecture which intends to be practical but original, logical but novel and fresh, uncliched and personal. So in opposite to everyday architecture. On the other hand, we do not serve to individualism, because we believe that architecture is nevertheless a forum, and not only a forum of art, but also an expression of values that promote both, or they could or can promote both individualism and collectivism. What is personal and what is common. So how and to what extent to ensure individuality has become to me, to my opinion, the most important question in contemporary architecture and urbanism, especially when considering housing. Talking about family houses, no? It is one family house. This is typology of individualism, of something very individual, very personal. Today the architect has to follow his personal beliefs and professional values to which he and us is committed. Or, on the other hand, he should take care of compliance of his project with the generally expected goals of sustainable development. And on the other hand, he should follow the wishes and expectations of his clients. This means that when designing and building single-family houses, architects are in the position to disseminate basic values of architecture, such as are, for instance, harmony, modesty, and efficiency, in a variety of particular forms and shapes. So that architects is therefore a mediator between individual wishes, how a house should be built and designed according to the client's criteria, and the professional values regarding the safety, efficiency, and compliance of the new constructions with the surrounding environment and its image. So which are the starting points, let's say, strategies on which and from which we develop our ideas? Let me explain them, in short, of course. The building should offer a variety of indoor and outdoor spaces sustaining different forms of living by following the principle with less, more. Second point, the place where we build, we should be changed as little as possible to cause as little as possible damage to the environment. The third one, the design of a house should be neutral so that it can provide the client with the various possibilities of use it over time, considering the flexibility as an added value of the concept. The fourth one, each house should be designed reasonable, properly placed, logically constructed, energy efficient. So no solution is given in advance. Each building intends to be original, to be unique, because it is the result of adaptation to the given conditions, requirements, possibilities, and which is special for our context, one can say, to our restrictions. The more limited the conditions, more innovative architecture. The sixth one sounds that by negotiating, we try to convince client of the basic values of architecture, such as adaptation, such as moderation and efficiency. So the individuality of the house is that which contributes to the harmonization of the site. And the last one, with each house we build, we strive to evaluate its surroundings, to improve or to upgrade it by considering local characteristics. I believe that it is the most effective way of promoting good architecture if we disseminate the best solutions that are proved by people in real. By doing so, the clients we involve in the process of designing and building their homes are testing and experiencing their quotidian architecture, their homes on the spot, directly. So we don't do architecture for people, but with people. It often happens that our clients, the users of our works, mediate their impressions, their feelings, and their findings to their relatives, to neighbors, to friends. So to the broader audience, I strongly believe that only the best way to promote good architecture is to offer people to try it out in their real life. Regarding the site, as you can see, we approach our project having in mind two basic kinds of interventions: compaction and completion. When reacting to the site condition, we use the potential of interpolation of new houses into the existing development in order to intensify it. Next to compacting, the particular size, grain, and flexible typology of freestanding one-family house enables us a lot of possible design solutions in completion of the dispersed development. So every assignment for design a single one-family house we take, it's a new opportunity to regulate the disorder and ugliness of the quotidian, everyday place we face. Our architecture is adaptive. It includes all given conditions and exploits all possible options. Adaptive buildings is unique and on-time creations and the result of the process of gradual optimization of all elements and structures of a house. No solution is provided in advance. Each concept is a result of given conditions, demands, abilities, and limitations. When developing a leading idea, we take into account that architecture is not only a useful object, but also a work of public art. Another characteristic of our works is the build structure we consider as an integrative element in architecture, not a supportive one, but integrative. The idea of the structure we developed from the very beginning of the design process. It represents a constituent part of gradual adjustments of the design concepts to the given context. So the selection of the construction system we make complies to the most part with the basic design idea, similar to the traditional way of building. So we use, as you can see, column and beam system, pole frame element systems, solid cross-laminated timber boards. Regarding the brief, regarding the technological capabilities of the contractor of executive construction works and so on. Namely, we can prove that it is a honesty to the material that gives the architecture of wooden construction simple and understandable form. I mean that by building wooden houses, we promote in the most direct way the values of sustainable architecture and its benefits. Let the images of family houses we built show themselves what is our design philosophy in practice, how it looks like. Let's start with this small, low-cost family house, which is interpolated in the middle of the suburban housing group. You can see it is a black spot there, black dot in the middle. Another suburban house is inserted into the slope above the town. The sections show how different voids are articulating the inner space of the house by height, because there is no space enough. Another suburban house is hanging over upper and lower yard, which fills the void in a row of houses at the edge of the settlement. The form of the roof follows the slope of the street. This one is a simple and very rational house with a view which was built against the slope and overhanging the yard. A house like a boulder leaning against the hill and fills the void between two adjoining houses. Dining rooms, as you can see at the top, opens on all sides onto a wide roof terrace. This is an additive house which is designed as a hayloft which fills the void between adjacent houses in the village. The yard and the terrace are covered to be an integral part of the unified volume. This one is a single-room house nestled in the slope. In a way, it's climbing, one can say, up above the village. Indoor volume within the volume, this is the theme of this project, is designed as a tube. This is the recent one. A hybrid family residential house with apartments we designed as a repetitive structure, which is interpolated on the center of the village. Namely, as you can see, the additive structure allows focused views to the mountains in distance, to the Triglav as well. Okay. Another house with a panoramic view, panoramic to Lake of Bled, is closing the group of neighbor houses, and the roof is the main theme. The roof is designed as if floats over the basic volume. Okay? The roof is really huge, but interesting. Okay. For the region, this one, for the region, typical homestead, a traditional ground floor farmhouse in Bela Krajina, around the inner yard is completing the edge of the village. The wooden structure was inspired, as you can see, by the traditional hay rack opposite to the house, so that the context is respected physically even. Eh? It's a very interesting house to me. No? Okay. This is another one, interesting one-family house, which is hanging over upper, this is the entrance, and lower yard, and fills the void in a row of houses at the edge of the settlement. As you can see, the form of the roof follows the slope of the street. This is a sort of cantilever house, or I don't know how to express this idea, this appearance of the house. Counterbalanced house. Another additive house inserted into a void of row houses along the central road of the small town, which recalls a traditional farm connected tightly with the adjacent fields. And to conclude, in this housing project, we try to apply the basic Gestalt principles in practice. The Gestalt, as you probably know, stands for a pattern, stands for figure, for form or structure that is unified, that seeks to make sense of how we perceive a settlement in its whole forms, rather than their individual parts. So these are the basic laws. The law of proximity is the grouping law that states the elements that are close to each other together tend to be perceived as a unified group. Proximity is therefore related to density and to the similarity, and considering grouping, which is the basic urban design principles and urban planning instrument. Meanwhile, the law of similarity is another grouping law, but that states that elements that are similar to each other tend to be perceived as a group. Similarity can be referred to any number of features, including color, orientation, size, form, mobility, and so on. So this was an addition of 17 one-family houses to the existing freestanding family houses, and we intend to form a central street of the village, and considering them as a unifying element. It was an attempt to prove the principles of so-called aggregative architecture that seeks to connect different design houses into more ordered whole. Repetition of similarly designed, built, and placed houses, similarity of cladding materials, composition of openings, and so on. To conclude with this, the modular building structure on wooden boards was prefabricated and even produced in the factory on the computer-controlled assembly line. So, as you have seen, there is no solution given in advance, but the result of a creative response to the given conditions. In this way, also an ordinary family house opens up more and more opportunities for investigation, for exploration, and creative work. In a plural society, architecture is actually the most confirmed if it is established in the field of individual construction. Its popularity and credibility depends on this way of testing. So, dear colleagues, let me conclude with the call for joint action. Namely, to escape feelings of guilt or helplessness, I believe that a direct, bottom-up, so-called activist engagement is the only possible way out of the crisis we are facing. So let us unite to act instead of criticizing. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that Professor Kožel used the title of the lecture as a challenge, because we heard an interesting replica in which Professor showed us his understanding of Baukultur and the role of sustainable house in the rural areas. The next lecturer is an architect, Dietmar Feistel, a partner of Delogan Meisel Associated Architects since 2004, an office that has established itself internationally with the Porsche Museum and is intensively researching the architecture of our time. Dietmar will present the Energy Transition Project and Architecture for Every Day. I'm asking myself how he understands the question, what is architecture for every day? He is also included in our panel of lectures because he built a prefabricated invisible house not far from Maribor in Slovenia. And of course, we are interested in how the house has established itself in Slovenia and internationally. Please.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Could somebody please start the PowerPoint? That's not mine. That's not mine. This one. Yeah, that looks good. And how can I? Okay. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, being a part-time Slovenian since 2013, I guess, I'm very proud to be here, to be invited here. I will tell you later how that came. And this is my second home country, so to say, and therefore I'm really pleased and proud to be invited here. I think today it's not because the Porsche Museum was mentioned, and Porsche is also a sponsor, I saw over there. But today it's not about the iconographic architecture. Georg Pendel also said maybe the time is over. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But I think each kind of architecture needs its answer, and it could be iconic architecture. But today it's not our theme. I think today, in my opinion, yeah, architecture for every day, that's really not so easy to answer. Maybe it has a certain kind of yeah, taste, but I think for me the topic today is more talking or thinking about the interaction between architecture and other disciplines or other qualities, if you want to. There is always a certain impact that, for example, the environment has on our designs, and on the other hand, architecture always has an impact on the environment too. So there is a close yeah, coming together of both. And it's not only landscape or environment which gives an impact to our work, but in the last years there came new topics like the energy, climate change, and so on. And all these things have got a certain impact on what we as architects are doing or have to handle with. So maybe let's start because today it's also meant to go from the suburban areas to the countryside. Let's start in a suburban plot. Everybody, or some maybe you know that picture. It's not in the suburbia; it's in Los Angeles. But whenever I go to Vorarlberg, where I was born, sometimes it reminds me on this picture. When you look at this, it has a certain kind of yeah, vastness, or however we can call it. But at daylight, it looks different. It's clear that this is not Los Angeles. We have got huge problem of sprawl, of urban or suburban sprawl. And we were asked to build there an extension to an existing building. The building itself consisted of 3 buildings itself, so it was somehow like a miniature version of the sprawl around this project, and that's how it looked like. It was really 3 buildings placed one to each other, and we were asked to do another extension, and we were completely speechless. We didn't know how to do it, because normally when you're thinking about some kind of context or to find any point to work with, we didn't. So therefore we thought about why not working with the sky, and that was the main idea, doing a building which is invisible. So that was our, maybe it's a kind of defensive way of handling an existing situation that you can't work with. But we found it, in this case, a good idea to try getting invisible or becoming invisible. The building itself was very small. It was more or less a sleeping room and a bathroom and wardrobe. And what also was interesting for us when we were handling with the sky, how about making an openable house or room, which also can be extended not only in the vertical and the horizontal way, but also to the sky. Therefore, we thought about making a building which really can be opened towards the sky, especially as this is a sleeping room, so to say. And that's how it could look like. To be honest, it wasn't built then. So it was just an idea. That was kind of a prologue for the next building that I want to present. There was the idea that, I think it was 10 years later, the building before was 2003, this was about 2010. Then we thought about how can we make a home which is as compact, as affordable, which has a very low impact on the ground, to make it as small and as let's say simple as possible, but having still a big number of qualities. So we had to find a balance between reduction and luxury, if you want to. And that was kind of like a catalog that we defined then. First, you can choose of 3 different sizes. Next would be to have different materials in the interior. You could choose furniture too, to add it to the building. Then you can add additional elements on the outside, and you can position it on any kind of topography. And it has to be as small to be able to be transported on a regular kind of a lorry, which is a size of 13 meters 50 on 3 meters 50 and height, I think 4 meters or something like this. And this should be brought to wherever. It should be possible to be positioned to any spot or to any plot in the world, so to say, and it also should be able to bring it away again as easy, like if it would be a kind of a mobile home or something like this. That was the idea. And then 2013, a colleague of us, an architect, he said he knows about the plot in Slovenia, which would be sold, and he asked our office, or we have 4 partners in the office, if we are interested in buying this for us or for the office. And we went there. It was in Goričko National Park, not far from here. I think it's 50 kilometers from here. And we were completely overwhelmed from this wonderful landscape. It's really fantastic. I have not very often seen something like this before. And we thought about buying this plot of land for creativity, for staying there, for living there, for working and so on. And we did that. Since then, I'm a part-time Slovenian. And that's the view towards our new plot. The landscape is perfect, but again, building seemed to be very difficult there. How can you add something which is not giving a harm to that kind of landscape? We didn't want to spoil it. And then in wintertime, when we went there, we saw that all the houses, when they are covered in white with snow, they are getting part of the landscape. So the building and the landscape is becoming one. And that was the idea that came back from the project that I showed you before. How about putting a building there which is invisible and gets part of the landscape? An idea, something like this, what you can see or not on this picture. The construction itself was, as I said before, has had to be as easy and as cheap and affordable as possible. We decided to use cross-laminated timber, which was produced in a workshop, and the whole building was transported on the lorry, and it was easy to bring it to the plot. And on the plot there were only screwed foundations. That means even the foundations you could easily take away after the building would have to be moved to another place, or if it should be deleted someday. So there will be no traces or nothing left when the building is gone. That's how it stood there while there was the grass wasn't there at the moment, but already looked quite interesting. After some years, that's a more recent picture now, the building really became part of the landscape. I will show you now some different pictures depending on the light, on the daylight, and also on the Jahreszeit. It's really changing its appearance. Sometimes it's quite, really getting part of the surrounding. Sometimes it's really present. Again, the openability and closability, like in the first project that I showed you, it could be completely closed like here, or like in the picture before, open. Just some images to show how it interferes with its surroundings. The material of the cross-laminated timber was so interesting for us because this material is all in one. It's the load-bearing structure, it's the insulation against cold temperatures, but it's also the interior surface. So you don't have to add anything to this kind of material. It's perfect, like a block house. It was built like it was built years ago. And the space itself is very small. It's only about 40 square meters. And it's only divided by a chimney. And that's all. So it's very reduced. And still, it's kind of, as I said before, it's a kind of luxury. The atmosphere is wonderful. In wintertime, it's also changing its appearance when there is frost. And just to show you, give you an idea of how this structure is there now, and everybody knows it. It's really we have lots of funny meetings there when people come and ask, what is that? And it's, but they like it. It's, yeah. A small sidestep about rehabilitation or rehabilitation. I was laughing because, or smiling, because that's a project that I've never shown before. It's a very private thing, because this is the house I'm living in. On the plot there was a old farmhouse which wasn't inhabited for, I guess, 10 years. It was completely, yeah, down, and when we went there it looked like this. And we were not sure what to do with it, but only this situation that you can see here gave us an idea. This house could be some kind of a, like a central element, like a square, forming a square in the middle of the plot. This was a garage. You will see it later on how it changed. So we started, and here we also said we have to do it as simple as possible. It should be no effort and no luxury and nothing else. So we just, this is my part. It's the pigs stable where there were the pigs living. And the only thing that I did was closing all the small openings and making one big opening towards the wonderful view. And that's what it is about. You don't need anything else. We didn't make any plans. We were just talking to the local workers. They were from there, very good guys, and we scribbled and we discussed how to do it, and that's how it was made. That's the interior. It only exists on one step. That's the idea behind it. It's a long space with one step in the floor. In front there is the living area, if you want. Behind it's the sleeping area, and even more behind it's the toilet and the bathroom. And on the left side you can see a wooden structure. That's the second opening, which goes towards the side. It's a frame, a wooden frame, where you can sit or lie in and look outside. So that's it, and that's how it looks at the moment. Or yeah, that's a little bit an older picture. Yeah, and even under the construction time, we also we already yeah, it was wonderful to be there. That's how it looked while construction, and that's how it is now. On the right side, you can see the garage, the former garage, which is now an open stable. On the left side, it's the pig stable. And the only thing I did was putting in front of the house kind of a wooden frame to give the view, yeah, like in a movie. It needed a kind of a framing to focus, to give a focus on the view. Yeah. From suburbia to the landscape, but now with a different approach. The landscape today is not only a part, or always was not only an area where you can live, it's also a productive area. And today we have got the situation, a good situation, to be honest. We are happy that politics and our society has already understood that we need to work on the climate change, and there are massive investments and ideas how to reach all the goals that were agreed by the Paris Agreement or by the European Green Deal. And that means that the basis is here now, that we can hopefully reach that until 2030, or let's say 40, maybe it's going to be 50, we can have a completely sustainable energy system here in Europe. That would be the goal. And we thought about what will it mean for the landscape when you are thinking about photovoltaic elements or production places. These are huge surfaces, and we formed a group with specialists to get an idea of what will be needed in Austria in the next, let's say, 20 years. And we found out that it's a huge area if talking about photovoltaics. And therefore, we thought that it would be our job as architects to take care of the landscape. And we think that it needs us as architects and designers to think about how can we influence the people who are in charge, the politicians, so that this transition which is going to take part will have a good direction. What we saw in the beginning, the urban sprawl, is already clear. It's a topic that has been pushed along the last 20, 30 years. And I think also in every village it is clear that kind of building structures like these are not the optimum. Densification and so on, I think, is already clear for everybody. But we think that the same change of mind has to be stressed by us as architects, thinking about what you can see here about photovoltaics, because at the moment there are no regulations. Everybody can put some photovoltaic elements on the roof or on the green areas that he owns. It's quite affordable now. It's easy to buy and easy to install. You can make money with that if you want to. But we think it's not the future when you are reflecting how many square kilometers of these areas are being needed. And therefore, we, in our team with 4 other specialists, we thought about 5 examples how this problem can be solved in principle. Our idea behind that was that instead of using green land or beautiful landscape with covering with photovoltaics, we were looking for elements of cultural landscape or man-made constructions, like a dam wall, for example, for electricity, could be used for putting photovoltaics there. This in special is a dam in the Zillertal in Tyrol. And we had a guy in our team who looked at the sun, the direction of the sun, if it's a good situation here, and this was perfect. It was completely southwards, and our proposal would be to cover it completely with photovoltaics. And what would be nice, not only having it as a energy production element, but in this case, we just proposed it could be used also as kind of a hotel. People who are not afraid of height could spend their night there. And so if both together maybe could work, that would be our goal, to bring things together and solve that problem. A second scenario, which is obvious, is the motorways need a lot of space, and the acceleration lanes and so need a lot of space. The motorways themselves are extremely space have a big space use, and there we proposed to implement photovoltaics also there. We could think also about using the noise barriers to activate them with photovoltaics, and there are many ideas. We are already in discussion with the ASFINAG, the Austrian motorway responsibles, and they're interested in now building with us together a 10 kilometers long test area where things like this or others could be tested. So it's already working. That was really great for us to see that this is very fresh. I think we made it 2 months ago, and we went there to the European Union, to Mr. Karas, and they were all, we had open doors, and they were really happy about that an architect or a team of architects together with specialists of energy specialists and so on were thinking about that. So the doors are open, we have to do it, and yeah. The next idea was a marshalling yard for trains, and this one is quite in a central area, yeah, in Vienna. Here we propose to cover it with a greenhouse, and the greenhouse itself could have photovoltaics on the roof. This is quite expensive, that's clear, but in an urban area where you don't have green areas to grow plants, this might be a possible solution. The fourth scenario was the Erzberg in Styria, a post-mining landscape. There are huge areas in Germany for the brown coal mining, and then these are also landscapes which are already transformed, cultural landscapes, and just as an example, we could cover that with photovoltaics and maybe make kind of the red line would be, yeah, whatever, a slope or no, a sledge, a slope, whatever. Whatever, you could combine it with sports activities or something like this. And the last scenario is also one which is already on its way. In Fürstenfeld, also in Styria, there is a small airfield, and on the left and right side of an airfield you have to keep a flat land, so to say, with no functions, and we proposed to put photovoltaics, but in a vertical way there, so that under the photovoltaics there still can grow plants, and yeah, we had the idea of yeah, making a flower meadow, so to say, that bees and so on could live there, and this is possible. We checked it with the yeah, governments and so, and they're buying all the plots now in Fürstenfeld because they have the need, or they are forced to find solutions for that kind of to reach the Paris Agreement, and they were very happy to yeah, think about that, and they are working on that. So yes, it's very positive what we found there, and only these 5 examples would cover 1% of the overall electricity production that is needed for Austria. Just to get an idea, so I mean it's only 1%, but okay, not nothing. So therefore, we really want to yeah, ask everybody to think about how can we handle those huge challenges which are coming towards us. If I have time, I can finalize with yeah, this maybe is really architecture for every day now. It's in Bremen. In Bremen there is now being built. 5 minutes is okay. Did it? 5 minutes. Yeah, it's fast. and in Bremen, yeah, there is an area which really has the goal to make an absolutely green and sustainable living quarter there. Just because it was mentioned before, not destroying things, but reusing things. This is the old Kellogg's factory which went away, and we were asked to refurbish it. That was one project that we are working on, or which is already under construction now. It will look like this. It's a hotel and a marketplace combined with office spaces. And another project we are doing there is yeah, let's say a housing project, if you want to, but a housing project combined with a greenhouse. So, and there we tried to come up with the ideas that I showed you with the Casa Invisibile, with the invisible house, to make as simple solutions as possible. the whole building is built like the casa in prefabricated wooden boxes which are connected. And so there are three elements: the boxes. In front of it there is a kind of what's the name for it? Like a loggia structure made of steel. And on top of it is a greenhouse. And what is red here, these are the cores. And the cores are the heating elements. So that's an idea. Instead of having all those radiators in the apartment, there is only one spot in the apartment which is warm or getting warm, like in former days, like the chimneys that were positioned in the living room. And that means the living room is the warmest place, then the bathroom, and the sleeping rooms are more or less cold. And this is being built. We were really excited about that. An idea like this can be done. The warmth which is getting out of the apartments is being collected and goes towards the greenhouse, which is on top. And on top, the greenhouse is being partly used by the community, who have like an urban farming space there, and another part is used for it's not the brewery, which was meant to be, but now it's a commercial gardening company which is renting that, because it has to be somehow paid. That's the section. And that's how it will look like. And the balcony structure too is being planted, so it's a very open and vivid space. And we are really we are sure that in combination with the greenhouse on top, it can be an input or an impact on also on the community who lives there. So just to show how with easy or with simple methods we are working on at the moment to find good qualities, not high-tech, but simple solutions would be our goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dietmar. I'm grateful to Dietmar that he showed us an extremely problematic topic of losing the landscape with solar panels and made us think how to reduce its impact on the environment in future. We now enter the responses section of our panel with short presentation of the research work which is based on the topic of rural urbanization and house construction. They're a little bit tired, I think. Our first guest is Renate Hammer from the Institute of Research and Innovation. She is very successful researcher. She has very successful researcher career, holds a PhD in architecture, Vienna University of Technology Studies and Philosophy University of Vienna. She postgraduate Urban Engineering University of Tokyo, postgraduate Solar Architecture. She was Dean of the Faculty of Education, Arts and Architecture in Krems, and since 2013, she established together with Dr. Peter Holzer the Institute of Building Research and Innovation in Vienna. Please.
So while we try to solve the technical problems here, I'm really glad and thankful to be with you today. And my task is quite tricky. When Alice phoned me, he said, you should prepare a response. So the one thing is before, the other thing is after. So I'm not in the position, and it doesn't really suit me to comment on high quality projects we saw here or on engagement. I'm glad if somebody tries to improve a given situation. So what I did to respond in a way was referring on the session title given. And I take the liberty to ask whether if it's sensible or even legitimate to assign the attribute urban to problems of rural areas. And I consider this approach only restrictedly suitable to generate suitable solutions, at least with regards to Austria. And this is not a philosophic or a semantic question, it's just about facts. And within the next 5 minutes, I want to go on with just one slide. I hope this works. No? How to put the presentation further? Support, please. Maybe with this. This works. So, this slide I show you is an exemplary landscape relief of an alpine area. I slightly modified the section of a real map, and because it should not be a concrete place. We are not talking about a special situation, but about a realistic topography. And if you look at it and ask where settlement could derive, it becomes quite obvious that village and city, even as small cores, are located in specific and particular places because of their different characteristics. So while the constellation of a mountain and the natural shallow waters, the mountain with its rocky grounds, favors the settlement of an urban core for strategic and power political considerations, for military and economic interests. That got nothing to do with rural area, because there we need the fertile soils. For instance, here in the plain, away from repeated flooded zones along the river and up to the gentle slopes. They are suitable for villages. And the area of a rural settlement is limited by the labor output of inhabitants. So working a farm must ensure sufficient food for the family within a fluctuation margin of natural cycles. So the year has a cycle, and the farmer has to work within this cycle. So what we see is exemplarily a natural footprint and an example of circular economy. And this economy has to support the city settlement. In contrast, the city is defined by temporal sequences. If you think about the history of cities, it's always told in 1945 this happens, in 1976 this happens. So it's really of temporal sequences and of changing and dissimilar events where the citizens are there to respond on. The social economic resilience of the village is ensured by something we really nearly forgot today. It's cultivating the commons. So this is an achievement of the community and a point of cohesion. And if this gets lost, I think it's not a question that the community lacks of meaning in the villages. And while it's quite logic that village structures grow by multiplying, the city's growth is limited within its fortifications. Living together in density and under changing demands promotes differentiations and requires organizations. Therefore, the city generates what we call today progress, delivers innovation and forms specific functions and offerings like the court, the market, the guild house. And I had just some days ago an interesting talk with the head of one of our biggest research programs, and I asked her, why do we have only a program that's called Future City? Why don't we have a program called Future Village or Rural Future, something like that? And she answered, because innovation occurs in the cities. And I think this is a total strange approach. We won't solve a problem like that. So with the onset of modern times, and this is 500 years ago, further progressive development of the city results in an imbalance of power. This progress is based on increased trade because of colonization, and it's in fact the start of what we are living today. It's the idea of growth. This imbalance of power means for rural social structures that they are weakened.
Povemo na koncu, ker če jim povemo naslov, ne bodo znali prijeti.
Oops. This becomes clearly visible in the compulsory expropriation of the commons. So they went to landlords and landowners outside of the villages, which leads to an increase in economic power of the city, but especially small farms are now not longer viable on the long run, while large farms do need additional neighbors. Thus, for the first time, we see something like a single family house in the rural landscape. And with this, a steady evaluation of rural structures. There has just been one short interruption of this evaluation, and this is when manufactories occurred on the rural spots. So these have been often located in rural areas to take advantage of appropriate production areas, resources like wood, or here in this case it was stone or ores, or in addition hydropower. So settlement forms with little or no properties occur both on the regionalized agricultural field and on the manufactories. But now entering industrialization, we get more familiar with the story. Because of changed drive technologies and transport possibilities, these former manufacturers are withdrawn from the rural area, at least partly again. Many of the smaller farms are now lost, and we see a second really crucial problem for the rural. So functions such as an active parishion or inns are gone. And in fact, this map was based on what we call Austrian school atlas, so it shows where schools are. And I think one of the biggest problems is that we lost the schools for the children in the rural areas. We had in every village from 1770 around this on schools, and now nearly on all the spots you see here, we don't have even a grammar school. So 6-year-old children, what do they learn? That there's nothing new, nothing to learn, no identity maybe in their own villages, because as soon as they should start to learn, they have to go somewhere else. And the further thing, why can this happen? Because we are able to drive with our private car. We see the results of commuting was made it possible to hop from work to home on huge distances. We see limited land resources next to the city, high prices there, and farmers who need additional money, so often give away their grounds for cheap building sites, whereby, as we see before, the meaning of the structural stock in the village centers got lost much early before. So why should this be an attractive spot for living? We see huge amounts of vacancy there. And nevertheless, even if what we call urban sprawl looks like what we see in the rural area, even if we buy the same house out of the same catalog and put it here or there on a spot. I think we face total different problems, and this is challenging in many ways, especially in terms of self-empowerment on the rural areas and the development of a new social self-image and self-confidence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Renate. Our next guest is Tomasz Slak, an architect employed at the Faculty of Architecture in Ljubljana, president of the Urban Council of the Novo Mesto municipality. Tomasz, please can you represent me shortly in 10 minutes?
Oh, well, good evening, everybody. I'm very pleased also to be here. I'm instead of our mayor of municipality of Novo Mesto, Mr. Gregor Macedoni, who was unable to come here. So I'm instead of him, and I will talk different like he would, because he is politician and economist, and I'm architect and professor. So it's very different language. But still, I'm in our municipality. I work on urban problems and also urban problems in rural areas. So our problems which are detected were or is right now dispersion, which is a very big problem, very dispersed buildings around the space, and need to stand out. Of every house owner wants to stand out. So how to make them not to stand out. We could talk about color, about height of the building or anything else. They want to build atypical elements of building design, especially roofs. They want to build flat roofs, roofs without eaves, inappropriate roof slopes, too big windows and everything, which is not common in our rural areas. They want to build complex building plans, use too much of vivid colors and everything else. So we are very hard work, we make very hard work on a general municipal spatial plan which are the base document for building in rural areas, and we try to limit all those wishes and all those needs to stand out. Our basic philosophy with that is that definition of single-family house is anonymous architecture. Although it's built by the well-known designer or architects, it must complement the urban landscape in unified volumes, among which the dominant is the church, the restaurant or fire station, shop, or something different, but single-family house. We have houses with numerous ancillary buildings and extensions and additions. And in our plans, we try to limitate also this. You could build by your single-family house just one addition or two maybe, and it shouldn't be connected to the house. It should be apart from the house. So all those limitations are not well accepted by the people if you are just acting toward them as an authority. That's why we are making some kind of urban politics which includes the residents of municipality via communications, via cooperation, and inviting professionals, public participations. So we are making a lot of communications with the public inside our municipality. we are supporting good practices and promoting quality architecture by developing and rehabilitating public areas in the city center towards outward. So first urbanscape in the city, and then this impact the rural spaces. Every village is a small city, very small city, which has center with the church and the square. If our municipalities manage to rehabilitate the square and the village and something very small there, the community regards that as a welcome, as a communication and cooperation with the big city, in quotation, with the bigger city, which is center of the region, which is Novo Mesto. So we are also implementation as many as possible public tenders to promote good architecture and to communicate when these public tenders are exhibited and when the new buildings are built. We have also open house festival, etc., etc. So we had to limit the ideas of common people and their architects who are not so good as many of you here are, but we have not quite nice urbanscape and houses in our municipality to say that every architect is okay. No, it's not. The half of architects just listen to the investors and they built whatever they said to him. And we had to make the rules, but not as an authority, but as a communication system, which is provided just by good urbanists, good service, and our municipality wants to be the service to the people and to all those who want to live in a rural area. And we can conclude that the people are very and they really very want to live in a rural area. They are not all want to live in the city. We have very strong economic situation. We have almost no unemployment, but they are commuting to the city, to the factories and where they work. But they like to go back at the countryside. They have their individuality. In a small city, you have just one facade facing public space, and all other three facades, it's individual. You have the trees and the greenery. So they like to live there, and they like to cooperate with the municipality how to make those their living better. And because we have very strong limitation of new building areas. Practically, we don't allow any new building plot outside the build-up area. That's why with that we promote reusing of old houses, and it's very popular in Novo Mesto to find old house with a building plot to renovate the house. And we also can say that the new generation wants the new type of buildings. So they start, in last 10 or 15 years, they start to renovate the old, inappropriate houses, renovate in a way to get better houses, to get better quality, and we are trying to encourage that. So, what can I say? We have a big municipality connected with other municipalities when you cover all southeast region. And as an example of Novo Mesto, we spread our ideas and good human resources on urban field towards the next municipalities. And we would check our result in next generation, so let's say in 30 years. Thank you very much.
Okay. We will conclude our panel with two last guests, Anna Kreć from the organization Prostori Mest, the spaces in between, and Andraž Keršić from the A2O2 Architecture Office. I asked them to present their position on the construction of the individual houses in Slovenia and the potential of their rehabilitation as junior architects.
Thank you. It's not working. I don't know how it works. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak as presenters, perhaps, of the younger generation. Thank you to the audience that you're still here. I know you're perhaps a bit tired by now. But foremost, thank you to Aleš, who invited us to this event so that we could actually express the views on the Slovene most widespread architectural phenomenon. I must admit that my first reaction, if I go a bit into retrospective now, was a bit like, why me, why our practice? Because unlike Andraž and his office, A2O2 or A2O2, we haven't been dealing much with the reinvention of a single family home. And I think we merely built one single family new. I want to stress this out. We built one new single-family house, while Andraž and his team, I think, really fantastically renewed a few. But then I thought, perhaps this is the whole point. And looking at it retrospectively, and also as my response to the presentation that I've seen right now, I'm actually really proud that, especially in terms of ecological footprint of our practice, that in 10 years of practicing, we've built merely newly built buildings. One is the single-family home that I mentioned, and the other is the 16-unit cross-laminated timber kindergarten, which is currently under construction in Končevje. All other projects of Sveto Mest Collective are actually linked to renovations, adaptive reuse of the existing public, but mostly educational buildings that are as acute, outdated, and full of ad hoc extensions, additions, as the large fundus of Slovene single-family houses that we've seen at the beginning. All our projects are done from the inside out, meaning that they intervene into the existing... It doesn't work?
No, I don't think so.
Really? Hopefully it will rotate. All our projects are done from the inside out, and I think this is especially evident in Poljane Grammar School, where the interiority of the atrium actually inspired the way how the public space in front of the school was designed. And this importance of interior, or the interiority, perhaps the notion that I prefer, was recently pointed out in a great interview with Aleš, actually, who emphasized it is about the beauty of the interiority, the beauty of the concept that the user feels, the beauty of the appropriate placement in the space, not the beauty of the facade. And if we use Watton's term, who translated Vitruvius and used the notion of delight instead of beauty, we can actually really expand upon the notion of beauty and what nice composition, harmonious space, beautiful space in a sense does to us, and it's healing towards the human being. And I think this beauty or delight in architecture, perhaps even humor or taking the project a bit more lightly, is the notion that both our practices, I think, share. Both are improving the existing condition of everyday life architecture, intended either for working, living, education. They're both working from the inside out, part by part, gradually, and especially in the case of Sveto Mest, this happens over 8, sometimes even up to 10 years, where we slowly intervene into one house and load it with various small projects, which we call loaded nooks. They vary from 4 to 600 square meters. Some have really modest budgets. They are small but well thought and precisely placed interventions, inviting forms that follow empathy, and I think they have the capacity to rejuvenate the existing building, improve its use of space and its atmosphere. We believe that they have the capacity to lift the spirit and well-being of its inhabitants, positively influencing their dwelling, academic and work performance, and also activate their spatial intelligence, which is often neglected but nevertheless used unconsciously all the time.
And we aim to address all built tissue respectfully and broaden the field of heritage. This is especially important because often the heritage is neglected, overseen and not recognized as building of high cultural importance. With insensitive interventions, this heritage is lost and the space loses its character and value. Good architecture, however, teaches through example, and we believe has an enormous educating potential. Raising awareness is another tool for an architectural practice. Projects of both offices work as pilot experiments, offering an alternative approach to adaptive reuse. We need to build wiser and renovate smarter. Even radicalist architect Trim Koolhaas argues that preservation is overtaking us. Sustainable approach to the renovation of all built tissue is vital from ecological and economical point of view. When we build or renovate, it's important to question the long-term effect, to calculate and minimize carbon footprint of the intervention. For example, we're looking at a house we renovated recently that had a renovated facade and new windows. A decision was made to keep the exterior as found and focus on the interiority, providing the family with contemporary open space that connects it to exterior garden. Strategy is another important tool we use to envision possible scenarios and enable flexibility for future use. As Meta Hočevar, Slovene architect and scenographer, explains, the architect pushes away the matter to form the void which inhabits a story. In the environment that creates our context and works by a very rigid set of rules, we try to create heterotopic spaces that are contrasting to its surroundings. Regardless of the character or scale, new interventions provide a space of Spielraum and escapism for a variety of potential users.
I would actually argue that single-family houses in Slovenia do have this capacity that, in a sense, they are a bit heterotopic. And as Francej Ivanšek, a key figure in social housing research and co-author of low-rise, high-density Murgle settlements, once said, they deny the existence outside its own world, which is one of the notions of heterotopia. Freestanding houses in the middle of the plot are narrow and high or almost square in shape, with a basement and raised ground floor. Light in the basement is more important than direct contact with nature. They have at least 2 floors and an attic, windows according to Jugo standard, with a flower-decorated balcony, a gabled roof with large eaves and other original decorations. Examples that you could see in the catalog, and for example, a neighboring house where I live in the suburbia. To continue with the urbanistic view, Edvard Ravnikar, one of Slovene's most prominent modernist architects, once went even further and provided an in-depth comparative master plan analysis of 2 single-family houses colonies, one in Stožice and one in Dravle, that were built in the 50s, proving the economic and spatial inefficiency of the scattered single-family house model. You can see the one on your left, which is planned and the way how it was executed, and the one on the right, which was proposed, providing high density, better garden, better placement on the plot. And he did this all calculus, proving the economic and spatial inefficiency through roads, through facade build-up, through roofs, etc. But unfortunately, all these positive case studies, among them are Murgle settlement and also cooperative row houses in Kosarjeva Street in Maribor, for example, since we're in Maribor, they all demonstrate a top-down regulative approach, which means that it could not follow the high demand of housing after World War II. And top-down regulations always demand vast plots of land, which we don't have anymore or we do not want to spend, large investments, investors, planning of communal infrastructure that all need to be pre-planned in advance. And all these procedures, of course, take time and money, but above all, a good housing policy, something that we don't have in Slovenia for the past 70 years. So historical overview actually shows that the dream of a charming house with a garden was actually encouraged by the politics, by banks, reduced taxation, that led people to pursue self-construction and investment of their after-hours time, after work. They invested their own money and, above all, physical work. The result are houses built by self-taught owners with little or no concern of functionality, sustainability, and, above all, beauty.
So we could say that there is no individuality in the individual house. Majority was although built according to standard construction plans made by architects, which were circulating around their neighborhood. Suburban settlements in proximity of bigger cities look the same. Hence, Slovenians had to express their individuality differently, using different colored facades, balustrades, pergolas, vivid ornaments, various gnomes, etc. And this is where the focus remained, completely ignoring the importance of Baukultur. We obviously need to embrace the contagious sprawl that represents our historical fabric and context. It is part of our identity, and we have to take on the responsibility and start dealing with it, not by building more, but with renovating and reinventing the existing. This is if we wish to protect what is left from our limited natural resources. We could be as radical as Germany in some parts, or Swiss, as we heard before, and abolish the ability to build single-family houses altogether, but also with the planned financial contribution and re-evaluation of long-term consequence of yet another newly built house occupying free space, we could gain a lot of finances and support public infrastructure like kindergartens, school, and healthcare facilities. We would like to think beyond the border of our plot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Because we started 30 minutes later, we have now time to start the debate with our lecturers and guests. So my last duty is to ask the public if someone has any comments or questions. Yes?
Maybe it's more like a comment rather than a question, but as we're talking today for building Europe and the future of Europe, it's difficult for me to define myself as an architect and as a Greek civilian and also a civilian from a European community. It's difficult to define where we stand as a country, the south of Europe, in all this discussion. Because if we had also an Italian, it's a pity that we don't have someone from Italy, he will say that they are selling, in Italy they are selling houses for €1 because all the houses, all the villages are deserted. We have rural problems, and this problem is focused on the fact that rural areas are deserted because, as we know, the problem of urbanization exists everywhere. Today we have cities that occupy only the 3% of land, but they consume the 70% of energy. And all the rest areas, especially in the south, they are losing their inhabitants. And if they are not lucky if the communities that are lucky to have tourism is partly a solution, because they can have seasonal tourism, but on the other hand, there is a risk of losing their identity, because inhabitants are leaving and tourists, all these houses are transformed in Airbnb. So I tried to define, as I told you, the rural problems is not only about sprawl of cities, but also about how we can bring back the people that are originated in these places.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Any other? Then thank you, Uroš. Thank you, Uroš Lobnik. Thank you to all the panelists. And thank you for being such a good audience and staying here such a long time. We are at the end of the second day of the conference, and while my microphone was on, you could already hear me making plans for after the conference. But before you go around exploring Maribor cuisine, so let us give you some tips and invite you first to the exhibition opening. You'll know. We'll give you all the information. So we would like to invite you to an exhibition that was already mentioned before.
Yeah, I mean, there is not much left to say about that exhibition, because we've heard the first two statements of that panel and we've seen the brochure. So the exhibition opening is at 7:30 as far as I know.
Yes,
and
it happens at the Maribor House of Architecture,
yes,
which is on the ground floor of the Department of Architecture, and the staff of the faculty is waiting for you outside in front of the door to take you there. You can follow them. It's just a few minutes away. And directors' meeting takes place here in half an hour, 7:30. The exhibition opening happens at the same time, 7:30. And you are warmly invited to join us. The dinner is not organized today, but if you want to stay together during the evening, I recommend you to have your dinner in the restaurant in Hotel Maribor, where a lot of you is already also staying. So this was all for today.
You're free. It's your evening. I hope to see you all again at the exhibition opening.
And tomorrow morning.
Yeah. And tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, right?
Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock here.
Have a nice evening.